President Donald Trump compelled Representative Adam Schiff to show a completely empty page during a live broadcast, creating a profoundly crushing scene. Schiff held an unzipped leather folder tightly with his two hands, revealing that the uppermost paper was totally devoid of ink. He was halfway through a phrase when this exposure happened, continuously repeating the identical talking points he had voiced countless times on numerous other stages. These constituted the precise claims upon which his whole legislative legacy was built. He persistently argued that the proof was clearly visible, tilting the binder forward to show it to the watching crowd. He performed this action similarly to an assured gambler laying down a winning set of cards. The audience members moved forward, the broadcast lenses focused tightly, and what everyone finally saw was a flawless white sheet lacking any text whatsoever. His arm suddenly stopped its motion, while Donald Trump refrained from raising his voice. He merely gazed at the folder before looking straight at the individual holding it, allowing a short, profound quiet to hang before an audience of 40 million. Clearly visible, Trump observed, adding that his opponent had reiterated that assertion for a long time. "You claim it exists, so show it to everyone, Adam," Trump provoked. "Everyone here is observing. We have kept our eyes on you this whole period," he added, to completely grasp how an elected official who spent 3 years promising the public he held irrefutable evidence ended up clutching a vacant sheet. One needs to go back roughly 40 minutes in time. At this juncture, Adam Schiff remained confident that his familiar portfolio would save him, much like it had consistently done before. The auditorium was packed to its maximum limit that night, crowded with journalists from a trio of broadcasting companies due to widespread whispers that these two men would ultimately debate face to face. Society simply cannot turn a blind eye to a spectacle of such immense scale. Positioned somewhere within the second tier of seats was a school teacher hailing from the outskirts of Virginia. For 36 consecutive months, she had placed her faith in every individual word of this overarching story. She had gone so far as to sever ties with her sibling because of this conviction, traveling to the venue by herself that night to seek ultimate validation. Remember her presence, as her viewpoint becomes exceptionally crucial as the events unfold. Adam Schiff walked onto the platform possessing the steadfast assurance of a veteran attorney nearing the stand. He felt completely confident that he was an individual who had triumphed in this specific rhetorical contest, in this precise environment countless times previously. He set his leather folder on the surface, aligning it flawlessly alongside the desk's perimeter, and upon receiving his moment to talk, he utilized it like a trusted instrument he had wielded for his whole existence. "Allow me to disclose something, frankly," Schiff began, noting that American citizens had been given a comforting tale that this entire situation was false and a completely invented persecution, adding that he understood why such a notion was soothing since it required nothing from them. He provided a stiff, patronizing grin before stating that a select few had examined the confidential data inside protected rooms, seeing information the regular citizenry would never be allowed to inspect, asking for forgiveness if he declined to handle a television set like a gathering of intellectual peers, because the harsh truth was that most of the populace was unequipped to comprehend the complicated proof. A unique sound moved across the broadcasting room, not quite a sharp intake of breath, but something much softer and noticeably chillier than that. He had practically just told every spectator watching from their dining rooms, armchairs, or cell phones that they lacked the basic intelligence needed to follow the truth. He suggested that the absolute facts were hidden behind secured gates that they would never have the mental capacity to bypass. Moreover, he issued this slight with an arrogant smile, entirely believing it would be interpreted as incredible insight. The crowd definitely heard it, but they did not interpret it as sagacity. If you have at any point felt marginalized by a privileged Washington figure declaring you are too average, lacking credentials, or too removed from classified areas to understand the truth, please do me a favor and click that like button immediately. The person who just degraded your intellect directly to you is on the verge of being pushed to show the exact proof he insists you are too foolish to comprehend. And he specifically carried a portfolio to do exactly that, so let us keep observing. Donald Trump showed no outward response to the brazen offense. For someone often described as a combatant, he held a stunning ability to remain motionless when doing nothing was the better strategy, and he stayed completely quiet at this moment. He permitted Schiff to complete his remarks, allowing the cheering that Schiff completely expected to entirely fail to happen. He let the uncomfortable quiet stretch on for a moment too extensive, followed by another, until a fraction of the audience started to wonder if he was even listening. Subsequently, he ultimately moved toward his audio device, declaring that the speech was magnificent. Honestly, the protected facility, the restricted data that only he has access to. I have encountered this exact performance in the past. I have been subjected to it for seasons. Everyone, he remarked. He nonchalantly waved his hand, demonstrating the comfort of an experienced entertainer finding his position. Therefore, let us participate in an activity we seldom have the chance to execute by letting him genuinely show it to us instead of merely talking about it, because I brought exact dates, Adam, having written them down, and I sincerely think the people viewing the ones you just described as too inept for the classified room can follow this dialogue without any issues, Trump expressed. Schiff argued that the event was not a game show of facts, to which Trump responded that it was much better, as the answers were already permanently recorded in the public domain because Schiff placed them there. He extended his hand downward to grab a single sheet of paper, performing the action without drama, similar to lifting a transaction slip from a retail counter. March of 2017, Trump announced, pointing out that Schiff was on live TV with Chuck Todd when asked straightforwardly if he had solid proof. And your reply is that you are viewing it, explicitly noting there was more than circumstantial evidence just so nobody thinks I made this up, Trump stated. Trump pressed the document smoothly against his table, repeating the phrase more than circumstantial. Trump emphasized those were Schiff's precise terms, noting that Todd naturally leaned in because it was a massive assertion, asking for exact details, to which Schiff's exact reply was that he could not discuss the specifics. Trump looked over the upper edge of his paper, stating that the event took place in March 2017, which was a long time in the past since youths in high school then are currently employed full-time, leading him to ask the very same question Chuck did about what those specifics actually were. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, the unique type of stillness that occurs when a massive audience urgently craves a conclusion but fears the reply. Schiff defensively replied that it was complex, emphasizing a significant difference between seeing signs of collusion and being able to demonstrate a criminal plot without reasonable doubt, insisting he never mixed the two ideas and was always cautious about the legal difference. That is a remarkably superb differentiation, Trump answered, expressing gratitude before pointing out that it was not his inquiry, as Schiff did not go on air to announce he had a mere inkling. You did not proclaim a suspicion. You unequivocally affirmed that you had it, calling it more than circumstantial, and declaring you held it in your own hands, Trump added, tapping the page resolutely. Thus, I am not asking about your doubts. I am insisting on knowing what concrete evidence you possessed and where the real details are. He pushed. Schiff fired back that he firmly supported every statement he made, prompting Trump to respond with a near smile, calling it excellent, and advising him to remember that notion because he would need it shortly. Here is the primary detail most individuals get wrong about someone like Trump. They presume his main tool is loudness. It is absolutely not, as his genuine tool is his pure readiness to bide his time, alongside his contentment in letting his adversary talk. Because the longer an individual talks about something they cannot realistically supply, the more burdensome the blank space gets. He brought out another piece of paper, announcing the date as December of 2017. A couple of months down the line, you show up on CNN, and at this stage, you aren't even acting cautiously, telling the whole country with absolute certainty that the Russians provided help, the campaign welcomed it. The Russians handed it over, and the executive leader completely made use of it, Trump detailed. He set the supplementary sheet next to the initial one, stating that this did not resemble a cautious individual, but rather a conclusive final statement, akin to a legal representative telling a panel that the issue is fully resolved through 4 specific phases that Schiff guided the entire nation through. And I would declare it again, Schiff interrupted, to which Trump replied that he was sure he would. Yet, here is the amusing aspect, Trump observed, lightly striking the second paper beside the first. Throughout those precise months you broadcasted that on CNN, you were concurrently telling individuals with great caution that it wasn't proof beyond a sensible doubt, begging the question of whether it is a closed case of being offered, accepted, delivered, and utilized, or if it is a complicated matter where you must be careful and cannot reveal the visible details, Trump articulated, opening his arms broadly. because your continuous argument is that the information is clearly visible. Trump pointed out that this was his trademark, saying, yet whenever anyone asked him to point to it, he immediately hid behind the restricted room that nobody else could access, performing a clever illusion of it being visible while only he could observe it, adding he would love to acquire that skill. At this moment, Adam Schiff shifted his approach, executing the precise maneuver that had rescued him in countless venues before this instance. He refrained from arguing over the confirmed timeline, being much too intelligent to dispute the chronological fact. Rather, he completely changed the core of what the confrontation was regarding, asking if Trump wanted to talk about ethical benchmarks. His voice regained its prior power, as ethical righteousness was an area where he always felt secure. All right, let's discuss benchmarks. As a distinction lives in this nation between two types of citizens, those who think anything is permissible if an action isn't strictly proven illegal in court, believing a leader can operate without consequences if a lawyer fails to finalize the case, and those who strongly feel officials have a superior obligation beyond penal statutes, meaning we are permitted and required to alert the public about hazardous and corrupt behavior, even if it is slightly short of a verifiable offense, Schiff proclaimed passionately. He added that he was never embarrassed by that benchmark, wasn't embarrassed presently, and genuinely doubted most citizens sided with the president on the matter, believing they stood with him instead. For a brief second, one must acknowledge that this was truly impactful as the audience swayed in his direction. It was an elegant verbal strike, holding the ingrained routine of countless prior flawless arguments. A reporter located in the third tier stopped writing to give a measured nod of agreement. A junior assistant standing behind Schiff pressed his lips together and nodded vigorously twice. Moreover, the instructor in the second row, who showed up looking for comfort, experienced that familiar conviction heating up in her heart again. This was the figure she clearly remembered, possessing the tone that sustained her throughout 3 straight holiday gatherings. The momentum belonged totally to him, and it remained stable for approximately 20 seconds. A federal lawmaker had basically just announced to a countrywide crowd that a person could be considered culpable of a deed even when nobody could rationally demonstrate they committed a wrong. For 20 seconds, that appeared somewhat honorable, but if that idea makes you feel a chill on your neck, type a single word into the comment section immediately. Just enter the word particulars, and then stick around, because this is the precise instant the ground completely alters. Donald Trump did not wince or relax his position. He completely declined to perform the very action the monologue was designed to elicit, refusing to get defensive about legalities, standards of evidence, or attorneys. This denial stopped Schiff from holding on to the ethical high ground he had just seized. Trump grabbed a third sheet that no one had seen sitting under the first 2. "That is a gorgeous monologue," Trump remarked softly, adding that he genuinely wanted to treat the concept of a higher obligation seriously, so he asked for permission to read who actually had a huge issue with Schiff's actions, since Schiff claimed the debate was about people who think anything is acceptable. He placed the paper down, identifying the date as the 21st of June 2023, and specifying that it was the House of Representatives, not himself, his lawyers, or a news network who conducted a formal ballot. Looking up deliberately, he noted that by a count of 213 against 209, they chose to officially reprimand Adam on the lasting record for spreading untrue claims to the populace about collusion, making him merely the 3rd individual this century to face such an action from the legislative body. The chamber grew exceptionally silent as Trump asked if Schiff knew what his own peers were doing while the tally was being counted. Trump persisted, describing how they surrounded him on the chamber floor, shouting words like disgrace and shame. He explained they yelled it forcefully at the individuals submitting their choices, laying the document flat on the surface. Yet, the fundamental problem with chanting, Adam, is that it fails to alter a mathematical fact, Trump observed. You are free to shout shame as loud as you want, but 213 is still a bigger figure than 209. The chanting eventually stops, while the official tally remains in history eternally, he stated. Schiff defended the vote as a biased political trick, but a distinct change occurred in his vocal tone. It was a slight increase in pitch, representing the initial tiny crack in his confidence, and everyone identified what that noise meant. Maybe, Trump yielded, but noted that Schiff had just lectured everyone about principles, pitting Republicans against his higher duty, only for the actual legislative branch to stand up and write his name in the same history book as men reprimanded 100 years ago. Trump emphasized that it was the objective history, not his own doing, pointing out that while Schiff claimed the nation supported him, the nation's elected officials formally voted, and he lost. It was exactly at this point that the foundation genuinely shifted without an audible noise. It shifted in the manner that massive mass moves, similar to how a weight one has been holding very gradually becomes completely impossible to support. The educator in the second tier felt it prior to logically comprehending it. The heat in her heart had transformed into an unusual, empty feeling. She had committed 3 years of her existence to total confidence, only to brutally discover that such certainty is a delicate condition. It represents a feeling you can only borrow from someone as long as they can provide the evidence. The representative she borrowed it from was just hit with a factual absolute, a figure he could not simply shout away. Right then and there, his own legislative body passed a permanent resolution declaring he had spoken falsehoods. It was not a digital platform comment or a personal viewpoint, but a mandatory decision. If you have ever been patronizingly scolded about honesty by a person who was later formally disciplined for extensive deceit, you already understand what happened in that space. Subscribe to this media outlet right away, because this marks the point where the story stops being about one dialogue and turns into an analysis of a misleading behavior that lasted for multiple years. Trump let the quiet linger, purposefully taking a leisurely drink of water and setting the cup down with a crisp, deliberate clink. For several painful moments, that sound was the only audio in the whole room. "I would be done right now," he expressed, and his sincerity was obvious to hear. He wanted Schiff to hear him acknowledge that if this were merely an isolated occurrence, one terrible broadcast where a person speaks prematurely, it would be understandable, as everyone makes mistakes. He himself says numerous things. A wave of authentic, friendly chuckles broke out on his half of the auditorium as he stated his objective that evening was not to destroy a person's livelihood over a single mistaken phrase. He assured him it wasn't, but emphasized to Adam that this involved much more than one sentence. This had been his exact tactic, done repeatedly for an extended period. He became so skilled at it that Trump felt the citizens gained the total right to see the illusion taken apart step by step just this one time, reaching into his own portfolio to reveal the core of the whole clash. There were no huge storage boxes or excessive dramatic tools, just a couple of slim pages that completely destroyed Adam Schiff merely by being there, with Trump noting clearly that Schiff was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, the absolute most authoritative position in the nation to look into an issue of this scale. And your panel, your very own panel, questioned 57 distinct individuals under oath, he said. He highlighted the entire thorough procedure, pulling out a specific sheet, 57 formal documents, and when that tiring process finished, "Do you understand what those sworn records showed?" Trump asked. He stated they definitively proved there was no proof of a conspiracy based on Schiff's own internal probe and his chosen testifiers. He re-emphasized it was his own panel. Placing the paper down, Trump asked the home viewers to absorb the fact that Schiff, as the chairman, had those exact records that went against the story he fed the public for 2 years. "And you locked them inside a shadowy desk for nearly 2 whole years, he stated. Aggressively refusing to release them, Trump stated, looking straight at his rival while a look of true amazement appeared on his face for the first time. "You only eventually permitted their distribution the exact day before the executive branch was lawfully ready to publish them on your behalf. Not a week or a month earlier, but the very day prior, after you had totally run out of ways to hide them." Schiff defensively interrupted that they were incredibly sensitive documents requiring strict declassification rules, claiming he followed the legal method flawlessly, which he said Trump would understand if he ever bothered to respect standard procedures. Trump softly touched the paper on his table, noting that Adam forcefully insisted the proof was clearly visible, which was his trademark line repeated endlessly for years. "Clearly visible so anyone can see it, yet you grabbed the one single file holding the concrete truth and purposely hid it in the darkness for 2 years, Trump stated, spreading his hands in mild shock while declaring that details cannot be clearly visible while also safely locked in a drawer. He told Schiff he had to choose a single truth. Either everyone could view it or solely Schiff could, and Schiff just hated the reality it held. The pressure in the studio finally broke. It was not chuckling at first, but a significantly more crushing noise for Schiff than simple teasing, acting as the combined sound of hundreds of people breathing out together as the same heavy truth hit them all at once, resembling the sound a mass makes when it revokes a person's trust permanently, like the tide quickly pulling back from the beach. He had purposely hidden the one folder possessing the clearing truth for 24 solid months, while gazing into broadcast lenses every evening and promising the citizens the evidence was right before them. If that thought makes you sick, please distribute this clip to at least one person who spent that time trusting his assertions. Only one person is needed, but come back right away because he is preparing to strike his final, most crushing hit of the night. One must give Adam Schiff credit for not surrendering silently at the very end. He improved his stance, drew his audio device nearer, and fought back with every bit of verbal firepower he had left, which was considerable. "Do you plan to minimize my whole professional life to the materials within a single file?" Schiff asked loudly. His tone fell into a quick, fierce, and consistent rhythm. He agreed to review his record, stating he was effectively bringing actual lawbreakers to justice way before Trump came down an escalator, noting he kept his position on the panel despite severe intimidation that he never used for public sympathy because it was part of the duty, and insisting he never once told the citizens he had verified a legal offense in a courtroom. He claimed he always mentioned there was evidence needing inspection, which there was, arguing that looking into matters does not equal lying, cautioning does not mean a trick, and he did his job by asking the tough inquiries a liberated civilization must ask about people with huge authority, questioning if Trump wanted to tell 40 million watchers that asking questions was illegal, labeling that the most alarming idea spoken there that evening, and warning all viewers to be frightened of it regardless of their views on him. For a second, it worked well and was undeniably strong. Warmth came back to his side of the room. Several reporters stopped writing furiously, and the shift of the crowd's energy started to hesitate slightly. Trump stayed quiet, letting him conclude the whole point before executing a move that stripped away his typical dramatic flair, adopting an incredibly flat, steady, and cold attitude. "Nobody on this platform is afraid of an inquiry, Adam," Trump responded quietly, causing the whole crowd to lean in due to his dropped volume. He continued, "I want a nation that continuously asks every possible question, but you did not pose an inquiry," Trump stated. He put one finger on his initial page and another on the last one. "You stood in front of the people of this nation for 3 straight years, consistently guaranteeing them that you already had the final conclusion, completely stating you possessed evidence that was greater than circumstantial." He reminded Schiff of his phrases like clearly visible and offered, accepted, delivered, utilized, noting that this series of words is not a question but an ultimate judgment, meaning Schiff read the country a conviction every night based entirely on proof he never actually owned. Trump maintained steady eye contact, asking if Schiff knew who truly suffered the consequences, stating it wasn't himself because he was perfectly okay and standing right there. His tone dropped even deeper to a serious level it hadn't hit all evening. He stated the real victims were the mother who cut off her son over a controversial hat, estranged siblings who haven't spoken since 2017, and old friends who called each other traitors at a cookout without fixing the harm, essentially persuading half the country that the other half were spies. For 3 whole years, blameless individuals lost their relatives due to your assertions, resulting in actual family holiday meals that just stopped occurring, he declared. Pausing to let the heavy weight of the damage sit in the atmosphere, he noted that the whole sad story originated from a file Schiff secretly knew was totally empty while keeping the clearing documents locked in his desk. No one in the broadcasting room chuckled, as the comment went past humor straight to the deep area where final decisions are made, causing the teacher in the second row to become completely still as she thought about her alienated sibling and the obviously empty seat at her own table for 3 straight holidays, performing a painful emotional calculation she wished to avoid. "Mr. President," with all due respect, Schiff tried to cut in, but Trump stopped him gently, stating they had moved way past respect 40 minutes prior. "Respect perished before you degraded the intellect of these individuals, stating they were too foolish to keep up. But I kept up extremely well, and so did they," Trump affirmed. In a panic, Schiff tried to fix the disaster using the sole technique he grasped, reaching wildly for his leather folder that he proudly brought out like a defensive barrier. He flipped it open before the quiet crowd and frantically started flipping the sheets, urgently searching for the one document to prove his critics incorrect. But it simply wasn't there. He passed a news clipping and a regular political memo, flipping back and forth as his immense confidence visibly leaked from his fingers. Broadcasted live to 40 million people, The Intelligence Committee's leader was hurriedly shuffling through his private folder, looking for incriminating proof that never existed anywhere to begin with. The only sound bouncing around the totally quiet room was the dry, panicked noise of paper sheets turning fast at first, then slowly, until nothing remained. His searching ended. His palm rested completely flat on a stark, empty page. It was never clearly visible. "Adam," Trump commented into the overwhelming silence, adding there was just nothing there to observe. 8 brief words managed to achieve what 3 exhausting years of fierce political debate had totally missed. Adam Schiff looked down at his unzipped folder, his gaze locked on the flawless white sheet under his hand, an incredibly normal piece of paper that just revealed the final reality about his honesty to the whole nation. He shut the portfolio painfully slowly with both hands, showing the precise physical movements of a person locking away something he can no longer rely on. The soft leather smack of the folder closing bounced through the completely quiet room, sounding exactly like a heavy gateway slamming shut. The debate host anxiously cleared his throat to shatter the profound silence and officially inquired if the representative wanted to provide a counter-argument. He chose not to answer. That exact sound, a beaten individual slowly shutting a vacant portfolio in a dead, silent space, represents the precise noise of a 3-year tale breaking down on live broadcast. If that instance caused you to shiver, make sure to turn on your alerts immediately so you don't miss what happened after the broadcasting equipment turned off. The program finished and the location cleared, yet the consequences persisted, so remain here. By the moment the room's lights fully turned on, the spreading video segment already possessed a cruel title. Someone had flawlessly cut the ultimate 40-second clip. Schiff tilting the folder to reveal the completely empty paper, his panicked shuffling through the sheets, and Trump's crushing final statement. By the middle of the next afternoon, it was literally impossible to browse any device in the country for more than 10 seconds without seeing that precise video on a constant repeat. The factor that should have scared the representative the most if he could feel anything past his embarrassment was that society had totally stopped fighting about Russia. They were no longer intensely arguing the details of collusion, legal plots, administrative procedures, or security rules, the massive subjects he tried to force the dialogue around for 3 years. Nothing was left to argue. They were just observing a repeating clip of a person holding an entirely empty piece of paper while constantly saying evidence endlessly. The primary nightly news programs began their shows with that specific frozen image of Schiff with his binder propped open, the bright white paper taking over the display. One major channel merely showed the picture under a graphic displaying only Trump's last 8 words in white text on a dark background because no extra commentary was needed. The image accomplished everything else. While out in the legislative corridors, a journalist approached a Democratic representative who had faithfully supported Schiff for seasons. The individual strictly asked to remain anonymous, looking anxiously down the hallway before talking a normal routine in that location, before sharing a harsh reality. Speaking quietly and quickly, he confessed that everyone knew Schiff's file was extremely weak. "We supported him for years because that is the expectation for your partners, even when they make it very hard. But you absolutely cannot carry a totally empty page. No media release can make the audience forget a blank piece of paper, and he will learn that brutal truth very fast this week," the lawmaker stated before rushing off before a microphone could be elevated. In the meantime, the instructor from the second row traveled back to her residence, totally by herself in the darkness. She declined to activate her vehicle's audio system because she simply did not require the sound. Somewhere close to the regional boundary, she steered her automobile onto the rocky edge of the road. She remained in the driver's chair with the motor running and the warning lights flashing in a steady rhythm. She pulled out her mobile device and looked deeply at a particular phone number she had dodged calling for 3 whole years. She clearly remembered the dry, panicked noise of those sheets flipping. She thought of the leader she blindly believed, urgently looking for evidence that was completely fake and never real, the exact evidence that caused her to ruin her bond with her own sibling out of stubborn faith. She did not start the call right there in the lonely, profound quiet of her car. However, she kept the deep resolve to do it, gripping it like a delicate rescue line. She swore a serious, unbreakable pledge to herself in the humid night atmosphere that she would definitely initiate that conversation over the approaching weekend. It would surely be the hardest, most mentally painful, yet at the same time the most crucial and required phone chat she would have all year. The heavy burden of 36 months of separation weighed on her. For 3 straight holiday meals, her brother's seat remained agonizingly empty, acting as a quiet, tragic memorial to a partisan split she stubbornly let destroy their family tie. She had purposefully picked the soothing broadcast tale over her own blood relatives. Presently, the bitter pain of realization covered her as she looked deeply at his known name shining on her phone's display, her shaking thumb waiting just millimeters above the connect icon. That unbreakable determination to finally fix things and bravely confess her painful error started right there, stopped on the bumpy shoulder of an incredibly dark, empty road. Her lonely form was illuminated only by the changing yellow light of the instrument panel, matched by the consistent, rhythmic, and almost trance-like flashing of her warning signals ringing clearly in the otherwise quiet interior. Simultaneously, returning to the harsh lights of the television set, Donald Trump's concluding move of the highly eventful night was something absolutely nobody in that crowded space expected. It was a clever display of deep drama, executed with amazingly simple actions, meaning he said practically nothing more. He merely stood up from his seat without rushing, showing a peaceful control and completely missing any defensive panic. He quietly and systematically buttoned the middle section of his dark jacket, a widely recognized sign of a completed deal. Then, as he started his unhurried, purposeful walk off the illuminated platform, passing right by the table where a completely beaten Adam Schiff sat awkwardly, Trump performed his ultimate, crushing move. He did not boast out loud, point his fingers, or elevate his tone. Rather, he leaned over with a relaxed, almost neglectful comfort and flipped the thick cover of Schiff's notorious portfolio back open. He carefully made sure it sat totally flat on the surface, positioned with exact angles so it faced the large row of high-quality broadcast lenses. Through that one quiet action, the completely empty, bright white piece of paper was proudly and clearly shown facing up, harshly bared to the intense studio illumination. He simply abandoned it just like that, turning it into a lasting physical memorial to governmental fraud. He left it completely open for the whole planet to inspect. He purposely let the Capitol's media group, equipped with their various zoom cameras and bright flashes, carefully record the total, raw emptiness he had deliberately come to reveal to the American citizens. As it finally resulted, a single perfectly blank page was all the crushing proof ever needed. If this intensely developing, remarkably profound tale has truly captured your undivided focus today, and if it has struck your natural, steady feeling of fundamental fairness for even a fleeting, singular fraction of a brief moment, I am urgently, earnestly asking you to take one single second of your time to click that like button right away. I request that you do this not just for the sake of shallow interaction numbers, meaningless web points, or superficial digital validation, but to actively, intentionally, and strategically make sure that the hidden, complex computer algorithm shares this important, carefully broken down, and meticulously detailed analysis with the numerous, countless individuals scattered across the massive, sweeping expanse of this beautiful nation. We absolutely must connect with the quiet, often ignored masses who silently endured 3 lengthy, painfully tiring, physically draining, and mentally exhausting years of being unjustly categorized, callously ignored, and publicly ridiculed as obvious deceivers, unhinged liars, and crazy conspiracy theorists. They suffered this relentless abuse at the hands of a highly influential, incredibly powerful elected official who was, in reality, genuinely holding absolutely nothing more than a physically vacant, utterly empty leather folder and an insufferably arrogant, condescending grin. These innocent, hard-working citizens suffered through an ongoing, daily, and unrelenting barrage of organized societal manipulation, a coordinated gaslighting campaign orchestrated from the very top levels of political authority. They completely, undeniably deserve to watch this final, glorious justification circulate exactly as widely, as rapidly, and as fiercely as those first, damaging claims did when they were initially beamed directly into the sacred spaces of our private residences. Moreover, if you strongly, firmly, and passionately think deep down in your core that the factual, indisputable, and objective reality basically requires so much more than a merely polished, easily digestible, and memorable slogan that is repeated constantly, ad nauseum, on every single large television broadcast network, repeated until a completely drained, utterly confused, and mentally beaten audience simply throws its collective hands up, simply gives up the fight and tragically stops demanding the presentation of actual physical evidence, then you definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, must subscribe to this network immediately. We are currently in the vital, ongoing process of constructing a loyal, steadfast, and dedicated group. A robust community completely devoted to demanding the actual, tangible receipts. We are a gathering of individuals who refuse to be pacified by empty political rhetoric, and instead require absolute, verifiable proof before we surrender our beliefs. In that exact same spirit of demanding absolute accountability, unwavering transparency, and ultimate responsibility, I desperately need you to scroll down right now and drop one solitary, heavily symbolic, and profoundly meaningful term in the comments area. Simply write the word particulars. Let the shared, overwhelming, and collective appearance of that one deliberate, specific word act as a lasting, unyielding, and permanent digital monument. Let it stand as an immovable testament to the exact, historical, and unforgettable instant when the massive, heavily funded, and carefully planned governmental fake finally cracked wide open, shattered into pieces, and crashed down on itself, suffocating beneath the crushing, unbearable, heavy burden of its own relentless lies, completely exposed on a live, nationally televised broadcast. Let this specific action serve as a permanent, undeniable mark that you were physically and mentally present, that you clearly saw the precise moment the grand trick was spectacularly broken, and that you completely, fully understood its massive, society-altering importance. Furthermore, I strongly, emphatically encourage you to take the crucial, brave, and necessary action of sending this exact, specific video link directly to someone you know, someone who unfortunately, tragically lost a valued, cherished, lifelong bond, or perhaps even a precious, irreplaceable family member. Send it to those who suffered this heartbreaking loss due to the toxic, pervasive, widespread anger and the continuous, relentless aggression that painfully marked those 3 incredibly gloomy, dark, and divided years. I desperately need you to forward this broadcast straight into the private inboxes of the specific individuals whose previously caring, closely knit, and loving relatives were completely broken, terribly fractured, and painfully separated by an unending, repetitive tale that we currently, fully understand was constructed totally and entirely on an amazingly weak, hollow base of absolute nothingness. Send it to them right now because, when they ultimately, finally see that infamous leather folder open to show absolutely nothing more than a vacant, completely stark white sheet of paper, they will intensely, strongly, and forcefully comprehend the amazingly beautiful, highly satisfying, and deeply poetic justice of this exact, unparalleled instant. They will feel this realization echoing deep inside their core, delivering a deep feeling of vindicating closure that they truly, genuinely believed they might never actually get to experience. Please, I implore you with every ounce of sincerity to keep this singular, fundamental truth at the forefront of your mind, above absolutely everything else you encounter today. Your deeply personal, entirely distinct, and uniquely individual voice is completely, undeniably, and unequivocally essential in this continuous, massive, and incredibly vital ongoing struggle to reclaim objective factual reality and re-establish foundational truth. I need you to understand deep within your soul that you were never crazy, irrational, or insane for simply posing perfectly rational inquiries when things did not align. Your constant, steady, and totally logical requests for solid, empirical, and strictly factual evidence were always completely just, intellectually sound, and mentally defensible right from the very start. Furthermore, demanding those tangible receipts was absolutely required and fundamentally necessary for the overall health, transparency, and survival of a truly free, fully operational community. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the most crucial, staggering conclusion of this entire agonizing ordeal was that the supposed indisputable, massive proof they promised us was never actually concealed anywhere clearly visible. It was entirely an absolute phantom, a deliberately constructed mirage that simply never truly existed anywhere in reality, at any time, or in any physical form.